Welcome, everybody. Good evening. My name is Satya Dash. I'm a senior advisor to Blockchain for Impact. A bit about me. I did 3 masters and a PhD in molecular genetics, molecular cell biology, and policy from Leicester, Cambridge, and East Anglia in the UK. I have a fabulous panelist. I will start by quickly introducing my co-moderator and then go through the panelists, their credentials and what they bring to the table. My moderator, Dr. Gaurav Singh, he is an MD in psychiatry. Then I'll introduce and welcome Dr. Pramesh. He is the director of Tata Memorial Hospital and also head of thoracic surgery at the TMC. Next, I'd like to invite and introduce Dr. Tony Raj, whom I have met. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times. And Dr. Tony is Dean of St. John's Research Institute. Welcome Dr. Ritika Sood from NIMHANS. She's a senior scientist there. Then I'll introduce Dr. Bhanu Duggal. She is a professor in cardiology with an MD and DM in cardiology, and she's a professor in All Indian Institute of Medical Sciences, Rishikesh. Then I have, I think I have two friends. I can call them friends, but colleagues definitely. Dr. Anand Bhan, whom I have had the pleasure of knowing him for the last 15 years. Dr. Bhan is a global public health leader. Then I'll welcome Dr. Pooja Agrawal. She is the program director for the biomedical part of BFI. The reason we are here is to not just talk about the program that we're launching called BIOME SAMARTH, but why are we launching it, and what is the need for it that we have felt. I started reading a little bit more, and I found this very interesting paper on the right-hand side, and I will urge everybody, if you haven't gone through it, it's a fabulous piece of commentary by Dr. Gogte at GS Seth Medical College and KM Hospital. Some of you would know her. And the paper is titled Medical Research in India, Fit and Fine or Frail and Vulnerable. And again, a fine piece of eloquence writing. I saw this piece where the paper is quoting a previous work by Professor Nandi on health policy. And there it shows that close to 60%, and they tracked how many medical colleges are publishing in a period of 2005 to 2014, and they found 60%, close to 57.60% of medical colleges did not have a single publication during that time, during that 10-year period. Again, a nugget of information I think all our panelists will reflect upon and other things. On the left is another commentary I read, which quoted a Elsevier publication, an analysis, which told us what India's strengths are. I mean, we know that it is chemistry, and our inputs for health sciences and medical specialties were very low. This was a 2017 analysis, so I think things might have changed a bit, but not much. This is where we are, and I think why this is the case. Are our doctors, the amount of work they're doing is humongous. The footfalls in our OPDs and wards are humongous. All hear from them what are the reasons for this. Next, please, Priyal. Right. Having said that, I think I've been tracking Indian biotech, biomed innovation systems for the last 15-20 years, and things are obviously changing, right? I mean, on the left you can see ICMR, again, century-old amazing institution that we have in India, partnering with IISc, Indian Institute of Science, to build medical data sets, especially for Indian population. On the right, you see, again, Indian Institute of Science partnering with the Tata Group, and it's also called the Tata Institute, by the way, to kickstart an MD PhD program. Indian Institute of Science, as you may also know, received philanthropic contribution from Mr. Parthasarathy and Mr. Bagchi for a medical school there, a year or two back. So things are changing in that front, in the way we do science and we do research in partnership with academia, research institution, and medical colleges. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is something that it's very personal to me. I've been involved in this for the last 15, 17 years. On the left, if there is in India, there is a conflict of interest because I was at BIRAC as a founding member, but I could say there is an India before BIRAC and India after BIRAC. The number of startups that we have, this is data from BIRAC ABU report, is close to 9,000, right? Maybe, and these are registered startups, so there are many innovators who are not registered and still working for solutions in the biomedical space. Of course, this is the total number of startups. My previous roles tell me that close to 50% of these 10,000 startups would be biomedical, medical devices, diagnostics. So there are close to 5,000 of them. And what we have seen is many of the startups obviously have received funding from BIRAC in the BIG program that we institute and all of that, but they get stuck at TRL, technology readiness levels of 4 or 5. And to navigate, the valley after that becomes difficult to generate clinical evidence, access of clinical test beds, all of those issues are there. On the right, there's another program in BIRAC, we started called BioNest, which we created incubators across India. And LV Prasad Eye Institute, one of the first hospitals where we had an incubator set up. And this shows that LV Prasad is, again, partnering with the Ophthalmic Society and doing a startup challenge. And this is just to show the kind of things that are happening in the Indian ecosystem already. Next slide, please. So while doing my research, I came across a wonderful article. Again, I urge the audience to read this. It's an ASCO report on one of our panelists, Dr. Pramesh, and it's his journey of being a surgeon and being at Tata Memorial for the last 25 years. I found this article very interesting. And actually, his commentary, and I've taken it from the article, really sets why we are here, right? And I'll just read it aloud a little bit, where he says, at a national level, there is a lack of research opportunities. The current lab and clinical research projects are focused in the high volume academic centers like ours, which is the Tata Memorial. But this does not filter down into the mid-sized and small-sized facilities. If we truly want to expand and build on India's strength, we need research to percolate at the lowest level in all medical college hospitals and all the district hospitals. And I thought, wow, this itself should be put on my slide deck. And there's nothing better to set the context than this opinion and perspective from Dr. Pramesh. So with that, I'll stop. You can understand what we're going to do in the next 45 minutes to 1 hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Satya. Thanks a lot for this warm introduction. Today, I represent not just the BFI, I represent the whole doctor community of my age who are working in medical colleges and who are actually working in hospitals and nursing homes throughout the country. So, as we all know that doctor community is one of the most sought after. After 12th class, I think many of us have spent a lot of time preparing for NEET UG. And even people spend 3 years in quota just to be in the medical system. So I think we represent one of the most, not the most brilliant, but the most hardworking cohort in this country. Currently, we have 15 lakhs in number, the MBBS doctors that I understand. And every year, in our 700 medical colleges across country, 70,000 new MBBS doctors are graduating. Adding to this, there is also a huge number of PG seats in India, 70,000 to 75,000, if I may estimate, if they all get filled up, because most of the time the branches like physiology and anatomy do go without a PG student. But all of them have to do their thesis, that is for sure. And according to the new NMC rules, thesis plus one more paper to appear for exams. Then we have the faculty in medical colleges, 80,000 plus, for which NMC has laid down rules. And in fact, NMC changes its rules every 3 months. But currently, the rule is that you have to do 2 publications to climb up the ladder from assistant to associate to professor. Now, my question is, and this is to the esteemed guest, Dr. Tony Das sir. Sir, even after so much of manpower, such a big cohort, and that cohort is supposedly trained in research methodology and basic sciences. If we look on the first year, second year subjects plus the PSM, we are trained in research methodology. Then why it is so that we are mostly left behind IITs and ISCs? Even the government does not acknowledge us. The 20,000 crore budget that just recently came out does not mention any medical college. Even AIMS is not mentioned. They're mentioning IITs and ISCs only. So, sir, how can we change this and where we are going wrong? That is what I want to understand.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. You're right in pointing out the statistics. We have a large workforce, a large faculty workforce, a postgraduate workforce. But as you probably mentioned, and Dr. Satyadash alluded to earlier, there is a cultural issue. Somehow, clinicians or doctors practicing are too focused on clinical work. And I do acknowledge that, I mean, the stats what were shared earlier are true. There are, unfortunately, some medical colleges that are unable to even publish a single paper per year. Having said that, I think very clearly organizations like the AIMS or any other national institute of importance, institute of national importance, or there are very outstanding institutions that have shown that where there is a culture of research, research has flourished. And the key components to that, one is to create that environment. And then I can speak from a St. John's perspective, where I'm a student of St. John's and I'm now in the leadership position. But yes, although we have approximately 500 faculty, and this kind of is true for most institutes, not more than 10% are actively engaged in research, writing up grants, thinking of research problems and pursuing that. And to shift that, there are certain barriers. We've been trying to understand those barriers. And some of those barriers include, yes, time for research. We do have this common ask from clinicians saying, give us protected time. And so we, since it's in a large organization like this, it becomes difficult. Departments have created their own way to create protected time for research, for faculty research. St. John's, as a medical college, tried an experiment about 20 years ago. They created a separate research institute, independently administered with its administrative team, etc. And that has worked so far. That has helped bolster some research and research activity, although I would say not up to the expectations. But again, the other issues come up is budgetary constraints. You have to raise grants to keep the boat, going. And that's worked so far. But more recently, I'm seeing newer institutes invest a lot in research. The other important thing when I say a research environment is having mentors. Research mentors are so important. That requires altruism, requires people to give their time generously to young faculty and postgraduate students. And we're hoping and we're seeing some changes in that area as well. And I'm hoping that that would catch on to every other medical institute would be seated with some of these individuals who are trained and inspired, and then who inspire a younger generation. But I'm hopeful, and I guess we should start seeing changes as we move along.
Thank you, sir. That was quite a revelation. So, like you said, the funding is a big problem. And today I also represent a funding agency in some ways. So what we have realized in past 1 year, and I'll be very honest in my speech, that there is a bureaucracy of research in medical colleges. If I want to do, I'm assistant professor, I want to do a research, then I have to seek permission of HOD. Then after seeking permission of HOD, then I have to submit it to scientific review committee. That takes a month. Then I have to go to ethics committee. Then if ethics committee clears, sometimes we have to take permission of dean. And after dean, then the HMSC comes, Home Ministry Screening Committee. So if you are planning to do a research and applying for a grant from a foreign agency, it takes like 8 to 10 months just to get the clearances done. And if I compare this with IITs and ISCs, the turnover time is 1 to 2 months. And if I want to fund an NGO, the turnover time is 10 days only in some cases. Why this contrast between these two institutes? And plus, why should an ethics committee meet every 2 months only? Why can't it meet every day, or let's say in a continuous measure? Why should we wait for an ethics committee to sit down in 2 months and then uh, clear our papers? I'll also bring in Dr. Anand Barnes, he has permission on this. Sir, Tony sir, if you can discuss this issue, that is very relevant, I think.
Yes. No, I do agree. There could be bureaucracy in some institutes, and while you did compare it to the IITs, yes, they've been doing this for decades now, the IITs, and if you look at their publications, that reflects the research culture that exists within the IITs and the aims. I think medical colleges would need to review their processes. Somehow we are very bureaucratic. Otherwise, as well as part of NMC, the whole guideline is very bureaucratic. So it somehow spills into research as well. We at St. John's have removed some of these shackles. To give you an example, our IEC meets every month, and if and we also have an IBSE. That's if you're doing genetic manipulations, but although that meets much less frequently, there are ad hoc meetings we call if a scientist wants to have a project review. And our typical turnaround time to go from grant application, when someone wants a grant application, because they usually come in the last minute, we allow them to go and apply. There's no permissions, and then the IAC goes through it in concurrence, and of course HMSC much later. Yes, we kind of match the IITs in terms of 2 months, but I hope that again is a cultural issue. We need to address that.
Thank you, sir. And like you rightly said, St. John's is up the list of HMSC with the most awarded in recent times. So we can understand that your research culture is one of the best in the country. And I like to bring Pramesh sir on this same issue. And with addition of one more question that I want from Pramesh sir. Sir, in today's scenario, if I want to publish a research paper, I will be sending it to a journal. And that journal may sometimes take 6 months just to say no. And if I get selected, then it takes like 1 year, 1.5 years. Plus, sometimes the fees of that journal is so high that I'm not able to afford it also. So, sir, how can a young researcher who is working on a project wait for 1 year just to get the publication and then also bear the fees of the whole endeavor?
So, Gaurav, for starters, I'm Pramesh. I've not been knighted yet, so just call me Pramesh. Coming to your first question about why there's not enough research, I think Dr. Tony Raj hit it on the head when it said the demands of clinical medicine are so high that research, and sometimes I feel rightfully so, takes a second place. Because if your time had to be divided between seeing your next 20 patients in the clinic versus trying to write up a part of a protocol, I think our primary duty as physicians is towards our patients, and I wouldn't completely disagree with that. The problem here is that we try and multitask to a point where it reaches breaking point. We try and be doctors, we try and be researchers all at the same time, and this concept of protected that just doesn't exist in most of our institutions. So I think at some point we need to figure out a way that we cannot bring cutting edge science and be cheap about it. We need to invest in human resource to a point where our clinician researchers have enough protected time to be able to offer for research. The second point is something that Dr. Tony Raj alluded to as well, the lack of mentors. And in addition to that, I would add the lack of role models. What you need is to make research sexy again. You want researchers to be role models the way cricketers and movie stars in India are. And I think once that kind of an example is set, you have people you look up to, you want to emulate them. And at least in my own experience, I found that a very powerful and a very strong lever to push more people towards research. I'm not completely disappointed at 10% of the staff being active in research. Each of us have our own strengths and our gaps and weaknesses. So I wouldn't want to force somebody who's not interested in research to go into research. And I see that happening a lot of times in many of our institutions, where today the worth of an individual, and it might be a clinician, is valued not by the kind of clinical care that he or she provides, but by the number of publications or their H index or their I-10 index that they do. I think that's equally harmful in the overall scheme of things. And we need to value the effort that clinicians put into clinical care as well as training as much as we do for research. So that's another point that I wanted to mention. You did talk about the time issue, about how long it takes for research as compared to the IITs and the IACs. I think there are 2 or 3 issues involved in this. One is the will of the institution. As Dr. Tony Raj mentioned, institutions can do away with many of these bureaucratic hurdles. So for instance, at Tata Memorial 20 years back, we went into a single system of review. We used to have this initial scientific review followed by the ethics. Now we have a combined scientific and ethics review. And I don't think you can be scientific without being ethical or vice versa. So you need to get them both together. And there is no need for the director of the institution or your head of institution to give you permission to do research, at least in Tata. And I think that's a model that we need to follow. So long as your working group feels that this is a research question that's worth investing in, bureaucratic, administrative hurdles. So if I'm a thoracic surgeon and the director of the hospital, I'm the least qualified person to decide on whether a study on leukemia and lymphoma is important in the larger scheme of things. So that should be completely done away with. You came to this final point that you directed towards me about publishing. And I think the entire publishing industry is a flawed industry. There are many problems with it. The reason why there is so much of delay in getting a paper peer-reviewed and published is because peer reviewers are expected to do this for free, while publishers rake in the money. I don't want to name publishers, but some of the publishers are amongst the top 20 profit-making companies in the world. And peer reviewers are expected to do this in their free time, free of cost, without any kind of appreciation. And I think it's a flawed system. And I think the more we kind of resist this kind of going for these super high impact journals, the so-called renowned journals, and go for publishing, which is accessible, open to people who want, other researchers who want to read it, and don't charge article publishing fees. I think that's the model that we need to go towards. And I know it's going to take a lot of effort to do this. Most people would prefer an NEJM publication over a eCancer publication. eCancer, by the way, is a completely free journal. It's indexed. Reviewers don't get paid, but people who submit don't have to pay either. And they have a unique model where if you don't submit a paper without an author from a low middle income country, you're screened out of the entire publishing process. So I think we need to be ruthless about what we feel. And the reason the high impact journals are able to get away with charging high fees and not paying the reviewers is because we as researchers and clinicians flock to them because we want the name and fame of having published in these journals. So I think the moment we realize that it's the quality of the publication that matters and not where you publish it, that's a very important first step. Thank you.
Thank you for that, sir. I'll just bring Dr. Anand to this discussion, and then I'll hand it to Dr. Satya. I know we are running late. Sir said that even if 10% is doing the research, it's good for the country. But NMC does not understand this, I think, because there is a mandatory publication rule for climbing up the ladder. And also, if you're going for an interview in a good research in a good medical college, you will find that there is a set number of marks allotted just for publication. And it reads like if you have one international publication, a research that involves a certain number of people, then you get 5 out of 5 marks. Otherwise, you get 5 out of 4, 5 out of 3, depending upon the quality of the paper. But just to come on this, sir, Anand sir, do you really think this NMC rule is helping us or not?
So I think as both Dr. Tony and Dr. Pramesh said, the larger issue here is what kind of research is happening, right? And are we focusing sometimes maybe more on quantity, and the nudges for that are the reasons you already said. You know, there might be pressures from the institution, there might be pressure from the regulator. And so everyone is doing research, supposedly, in inverted commas, and publishing. But what kind of research is happening and what is getting published can, there is a lot of improvement, scope for improvement. I think that broadly in most medical institutions, there are four kind of people, right? There are people who are clinicians and they enjoy being clinicians. There are people who are academics, they enjoy teaching. There are people who are researchers, they enjoy research more, and there are people who are administrators, right? Now, you might have someone who's a combination of one or two or three or four. People like Dr. Tony and Pramesh probably managed to do all four things together, but not everyone can do it. And not everyone should have to do it, in the sense that if we had tracks which allowed for anyone to excel in one or two areas, which is what they are passionate about, and that's what they are evaluated against, then that is good enough. When we try to cram things onto people and expect them to have to do a bit of everything, I think that's partly where the problem arises. And then, of course, you have the Jugadu system of a predatory publication house willing to give you a publication very quickly. And it's sometimes very difficult to be able to evaluate if something is a good publication or not. But this is where I think institutions and their governance structures are important. This is where mentorship is important, all of the things that we've already been speaking about. And of course, mechanisms like ethics committee are there. Dr. Shanta Kumari in the chat has also asked, can't we have ethics committees meeting more frequently? Of course they can, but then the institutions have to be supported for that, right? Now, some institutions like Tata have more than one ethics committee to allow for more frequent turnaround. They are also accredited ethics committee. They're supported institutionally. So if you have mechanisms like ethics committees, they can certainly be asked to get more engaged, but the institution has to back them up by ensuring that the members who are chosen have the time, that they are supported, that they have also mechanisms of their own practices. But we would need that institutional culture to change to allow for that. So I'll stop here in the interest of time, but over to you, Satya, for a follow-up.
Great. I can see a raised hand from Dr. Pramesh, and just maybe a quick comment before we move.
Yeah, I'll be very brief here. So what we need with the NMC, and we need to really advocate for this, is that faculty promotions should be based on publications from their trainees, not your own publications. What I see happen very often in medical colleges is the student does all the research and the publication goes in the name of the professor, just because the professor needs X number of publications to be to doing that. I would, on the other hand, advocate for a system where promotions, both within the NMC as well as within the institution, are based on your colleagues and your mentees' performance rather than your own. I'll stop there.
Okay, wonderful. I think I can see that there's a lot of activity on the chat box side as well. Dr. Santa Kumari, Dr. Yogesh Ostwal also wrote a very interesting comment. And this is a good segue for the next round of questions. This has been very active first round. And each of you in the panel, you have seen basic science and translational science being done in a hospital setting, where the connection between a basic university and a hospital is there. You go anywhere, it's there, whether it is the MD Anderson Cancer Center or Cleveland Clinic or Buffalo or Institute of Cancer Research in the UK. So what do you think are still the challenges of doing quote unquote basic research and translational research in a hospital setting? And I'll, Dr. Ritika and Dr. Bhanu are waiting patiently. Maybe we'll change the direction of the clock through them first. So, Dr. Bhanu, would you like to first comment on it, and then Dr. Ritika?
So, basically, what I would like to say is what Dr. Tony and Pramesh said. Dr. Pramesh said was regarding having role models. So role models are completely lacking for our clinical students, and hence we need role models. So like Dr. Balram Bhargav was there in cardiology, and he was a basic researcher. He's an excellent role model for ICMR and AIIMS-like institute. So clinicians are exposed to a number of problems, but their time is very important. So another thing what I would like to highlight is in many places, the research faculty and the clinical faculty are separate, and they can work in coordination rather than pushing a person who loves clinical work to do research. So let the research cadre like the MD PhD program and the clinical cadre be separate and work in tandem while the clinical faculty gets the data for the research faculty to work on. One more point I wanted to speak was what Dr. Pramesh said was regarding the authorship. So it is very funny, like even in an AIIMS-like institute, we are forced to be the first and the second authors because in the promotion, they say you should be the first or the second author. So I realized when I came back from abroad, I used to be the senior author, which was the fifth and the sixth author. And they told me that those publications will not be considered for any
Fascinating for us
promotion.
to
So I have
hear.
to force my student, no, put me as the first author. So yeah, and translational research again in the when we go to the lab and when we are operating, we realize that this thing should be there. And coming to the scene in India, an important thing which I found was when I was on the research panel in some cardiology centers which are doing excellent research and making products in India, we are not going towards excellence like Japan. So what happens is, I'll just tell you, like I'm more familiar with cardiology coming to the stents or the sheets which are made in India. I used to tell them that this is not, when I'm doing the case, this is not excellent. It does not have the feeling. The stent does not have the feeling, or it's not made so well as it is made in Japan. He says, ma'am, wo to बिक रहा है South America or Africa में, we are getting the money back. So we are not interested in having the finest products. So that kind of thing should also be promoted in India, that if it is made in India, if it has the label, it should be excellent, not that we are doing business.
This is okay. But the word operative word that Dr. Dugal you have said is excellence, and yeah, whether it's Japan or whether it is even the Cardiology Institute at the Case Western University, which is also very well known for cardiology work, it's all about excellence and no jugaad. It's the music to my ears. I don't believe in jugaad. Can we bring in Dr. Ritika? You know, you are a scientist within NIMHANS. You can be as honest as possible. How do you see this question, and what are your reflections on this?
Right. So I will add to Dr. Bhanu's point of opportunities being available for basic scientists and clinicians to be proximate to each other, and that is one thing. So, for example, I'm based at Center for Brain and Mind, where we're fortunate to have this opportunity that basic scientists, clinicians, data scientists, people from different backgrounds and specialties work in very close quarters. So research questions emerge just spontaneously on that regard, and that is something on a broader scale is missing in India. And as was mentioned earlier as well, that here clinicians don't have protected time, which is also a barrier for them to pursue. And so while it's understandable that the system here is different than in other countries, but within the constraints of the system, I hope that opportunities can be created where which provide this forum for basic scientists and clinicians to sort of come together and brainstorm on what research could be pursued. And of course, funding opportunities is also a big thing. Like abroad, there is also significant private sources of funding, which is few and far between in India. And when you add to that government funding tends to be erratic, it really creates a systemic problem that we hope that new solutions to that emerge.
So it'll take me an hour to speak about the National Cancer Grid.
You are more than welcome to stay with us for an hour. We will continue.
I'll give you the 35,000 feet version of the Cancer Grid. So this is something that we started 12 years back with an effort to first have uniform standards of cancer care across India. Second, to build capacity that would meet the unmet need in cancer care, and finally to have a ready platform for multicentric cancer research. Given the theme of this discussion, I'll restrict myself only to the research. I'm happy to share some of the other experiences on a subsequent call later. But what we did was first decide why do we want to do India-centric research. And at least in cancer, and I'm pretty sure this is true of most other areas as well, much of the research that's done in high-income countries does not automatically translate into implementable ideas in India, primarily for various reasons. I mean, it's not fit for purpose, it's too expensive, we don't have the expertise, nor the infrastructure. But more importantly, what we've realized is research done in the West is not always as cutting edge as we think it is. So we looked at 72 consecutive drugs approved for cancer by the US FDA. And what we realized was that the median improvement in progression-free survival and overall survival of 72 consecutive blockbuster drugs approved by FDA was just 2 months. And the average cost of these drugs was $100,000 per month. So clearly not something that fit for purpose here. Second, we don't have protected time. I think many panelists have alluded to this. Third, lack of funding. And finally, the lack of willingness to collaborate. So we decided and the lack of training in research methods. So we thought we'll address each of these issues rather than just lament about all of these failings that we've had. So one of the first things that we did was to create a workshop which trains folks in cancer research on how to do research. So the way the workshop runs is that someone comes in with a one-page concept, which is a vague idea in the back of their minds. Over a period of 6 very intensive days, these are actually 16 to 18-hour days that we are talking about, this one-page concept note gets converted into a full-fledged research protocol ready for submission to ethics committees. It's kind of a boot camp for how to do research. So we fixed the training aspect of it. So to date, we've trained over 450 clinician researchers and biostatisticians on how to do research. The second aspect we looked at was how can we mitigate the protected time issue. We can't reduce the number of patients, nor can we reduce the science that goes into research. What we thought we'd do is to create an academic clinical trials unit and a contract research organization, which would take all the administrative responsibilities out of clinician researchers. So no contracts, no insurance, no help with biostatistics, help with study designs, all would be provided by the clinical trials unit. So again, taking away much of the pain points of doing research from clinicians. We instituted a mechanism for funding clinical research, but we insisted on a few criteria to qualify for this. First, it had to be a multicentric, preferably a multidisciplinary research. We don't any longer fund single center studies, nor do we fund single discipline studies. The second is that the problem that's being addressed is something that has to be either common or unique to India. We don't want to research on esoteric, rare diseases, which I'm not belittling it, but given the fact that our bandwidth is limited, we'll focus on the ones that are common or unique. If it's an interventional study, it has to be something that's cost effective. We don't want new interventions, however cutting edge they might be, if only 5% of India's population can afford it. Fourth, we have a strong emphasis on public and patient involvement. We don't fund research if we don't have patient advocates and the public as an extremely important elemental part of the research, and not just for optics, but right from the time the research is getting designed. And finally, anyone who gets funded through the Cancer Grid has to agree to share their data in the public domain. This is public money that's going into research, and the data will be available for other researchers to mine, and they have to agree to this. If you don't agree to this, you don't get funded.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think we just about the time that you would dropping off. But before you do, thank you very much for these comments. I think we are recording it, and these have been we will integrate some of these into our policy itself. Dr. Tony has been waiting patiently. I think Dr. Bhanu also has to go, but and Pooja and Anant are also waiting. But I'll just ask one question before we go over to them, and is Rishikesh, the center of yoga. There's an All India Institute of Medical Sciences now. How do you think the research culture is what you want to build in India? So in next 5 years, AIIMS Rishikesh, what's your vision for research in AIIMS Rishikesh?
So, Satya, what is happening in the new AIIMS, there are two things. We have protected time for research, but
when you say that, do you mean you give 1 day a week, 2 days a month, 20% of their time? What do you mean by protected time?
Yeah, so for AIIMS faculty, the time given is 30% of their time. But the paradox is that in the super specialities, we are facing a very severe faculty crunch. So what is happening is, though the protected time is there's a severe faculty crunch in the AIIMS because there are 2 or 3 issues. One is in IIT and IIC. I mean, when you do a research, when you have a product, you're able to gain financially, like you're able to set up the company, and you're able to, in the IITs, you get time to do consultation, right? To do consulting, they earn a lot of money, the IITs. While the doctors in AIIMS, though ICMR is trying to address this, do not have any financial gain by investing any time in research and doing any innovation, because they do not gain financially out of it. So that is why innovations are coming out the way they should from AIMS. They have ideas, doctors want to work. So they are only the only thing being given is, okay, the number of publications and which journal they are in. So, though it is changing, ICMR has come up with a policy, but people have been slow to adopt it. The other is, if the faculty issue is addressed, the protected time will be given. Third is funding. Funding is taking a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to get funding from the public, and we are not encouraged to partner with private institutions. So the whole AIMS culture has to be changed. It has to be. So I have written to the government, we need to adopt the culture, and that's why we are lagging behind the IITs and the IICs.
So this is a wonderful point. And just before you go, and of course, we'll talk about SAMARTH to our audience and how the funding thing we are addressing through that. And Pooja will mention that in the end about the nuances of SAMARTH. Before you go, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Delhi, we did Stanford India Biodesign way back in 2007-8. We also funded an incubator inside there. And now, of course, the Stanford India Biodesign is now called School of International Biodesign. And that has funding a lot of innovators there. I wonder whether that model, what I also saw LV Prasad having in BioNest or St. John's having that, would that be something, besides, of course, harmonization of rules and regulation within the ICMR institutes and all, or Department of Health? What do you think would be, do you think even a 5% of your faculty and young researchers would be interested to do something innovative and work with startups? And I'll bring in Ritika and Dr. Tony into this mix, and Anant as well. But I'm cognizant of the fact that you have to step out. So if you could reflect on that, and then we'll go around the table again.
Yeah. So I would. There's a change in the generation. There's a generation gap these days, which Dr. Tony and others would think. Initially, we were happy with the salaries we used to get. But the younger generation, when they join the super speciality, they are very much interested in how soon they will join the corporate sector. So what I have done is, when they join, but some come from families of researchers, like their father was a doctor or he was in this league. So moment the student joins, I ask them, what is their long-term goal? So I differentiate. I do not push the people who want to join the corporate sector and they earn a lot from doing those surgeries. But there are certain students who really want to do research, who want to get into academics. So it's best to separate the two and then get the academic students to work on these projects. It would be great if we are able to get some financial returns and time-bound funding. What happens? You apply for a project, and when you get the funds after 1 or 2 years, 12 months, you have already lost research in the project, or someone has moved ahead in that stream already. And by the time the money comes, it does not matter. Only thing before I go, I wanted to highlight 2 things about research. Is what Dr. Pramesh said was that our health problems are slightly different from those of the West. Like we have rheumatic heart disease. So the funding which is coming is not channeled into the conditions which are persistent in India. So when HIV was there, we were funding HIV in India while we had other diseases which could have been funded. Number 4 is our treatment guidelines are, there are hardly any patients of rheumatic heart disease in USA. But we follow the American guidelines and the American line for innovation. So we should tackle the problems which South Asians face, and we should encourage innovations and startups to handle these problems.
Thank you for mentioning this. This has been a brilliant intervention by you and Dr. Pramesh. Again, it's already 6:30. I know you will probably step out. Thank you for being here. And you have given us that path to discuss this interface between medical hospitals, research institutes, startups, innovators, that I think Anant, Dr. Tony, Ritika must have been doing. I'll also bring in Gaurav here if you want to just come in and take the baton again.
Thank you, Dr. Satya. And I was listening to Dr. Bhanu, and the problem that she raised about getting the funding late. I think in the end, when Dr. Pooja will speak, she will speak about SAMARTH, and this is the very main problem that we wanted to address, is to park the money upfront with the institute and then let them do the research. And also the topics that they want will be actually in the Indian context only. So I think Dr. Pooja, when she comes in, she can reflect on this. I'll again move to Professor Tony. And sir, my next question is, I live in a tier 3 city, and I think on a walking distance, there is an engineering college made in a 2000 square feet area. It has an incubation center. So why can't medical colleges, and yours is an exception because you already have that, why can't medical colleges have these incubation centers where like the engineering colleges, doctors can go and have this entrepreneurial mindset? We doctors are hardly aware of terms like angel investors and the VC funds and all. We have no idea about this, and we are considered to be one of the most knowledgeable people on in India. So, sir, how can we change this culture, and can we introduce this concept of incubation center in medical colleges? Adding to this, we also know that in many engineering colleges, there is a campus placement of medical students. So companies will go and have those campus placements. There is no culture like this in medical colleges. I know many doctors struggling to get a job, but this option is not available to them. If I talk to a startup will say that, okay, we have one mentor as a doctor who is a very big doctor, who is a very big researcher. I personally know that doctor does not even have time for his own patients properly. So how can he mentor you is a very big thing to ask for. So these phenomena that are happening in India in engineering college are not happening in medical colleges, and how can we go about it?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess, again, it's about awareness, and we kind of learned it the hard way. But if you look at a DSR notification, which went out in the 90s, probably 92, about encouraging every higher educational institution to adopt this whole MIT/Stanford model, that was very forward for early 90s. It's only when you look at the new ICMR guidelines, which came up for entrepreneurship in 2022, that DSR notification is listed in that guideline. So the IITs and many engineering colleges adopted it probably 2-3 decades ago and have reached where they are. However, medical colleges and other allied health or dental colleges were still focused on only teaching, and research was, they were just getting pushed because of, as you said, we discussed that earlier. But innovations was nowhere in the horizon. So I think awareness about, yes, institutions can set this up, and we were looking at the IIMs, the IITs as models and how they set it up. And we were very fortunate that ICMR came up with this wonderful entrepreneurship policy. So just to allude to what Dr. Bhanu mentioned earlier, we did things like changing policies. We had to, as a medical school, we had to open out, change our policy. So we added a consultancy policy like what the IITs have. We now have an entrepreneurial policy exactly as the ICMR verbatim. It's almost verbatim. We've just adopted it. So, and now we've already seen the first 2 startups created by 2 faculty within St. John's. So we might be a little ahead, but why can't other medical colleges? I think they can. It's out there, and I think we need more awareness, more encouragement, more allow faculty from medical colleges to give them the freedom, and I'm sure the leadership should see that change.
Great. Gaurav, let me come in here to Anant and Ritika. Anant, you've been also waiting patiently. You have interacted with thousands of startups. I showed that data of 10,000 startups. Almost 80% of them would have been funded by BIRAC. So this is a question to again all 3 of you here. What do you think this dance between startups and medical colleges, clinical research centers in the last few years? What are the positives? What are the still gaps that you see? And a little more directed question to Ritika, in a sense that when I asked the Drosophila question, you kind of scratched your hair a little bit. It's which to a psychiatrist like Gaurav here sends signals. So, so the question is, how was your experience to come from Buffalo with a pathology PhD, enter NIMHANS, and then do a laboratory research, right? And so that journey, if you can reflect. And to Dr. Tony, I know that innovators and even big companies and SMEs, including another hat that I wear, we talk to you. So how that is evolving in the last 20-25 years that you have seen from Koramangala, where you are stationed. So let's go through Anand. Anand has been in many committees at BIDAC. He interacts with startups. What is that journey, you think, how the clinicians are interacting or not? Is there a gap? And then to Ritika, and then to Dr. Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Satya. So I think in many ways, the let's say biotech or device development or innovation in the biomedicine space, a lot of times these almost seem like parallel tracks. No, you will have engineers, designers, you will have biotech specialists who work on an idea. They develop something very late in the game. They will be told, most likely they will not themselves reach out to a clinician because you've never gotten clinician inputs. You thought of an idea, you did a Google search. Maybe if you're good, you did a PubMed search, but that's what you thought was required, because you have a slide on burden, but then you don't realize the lived reality of what is relevant in our context, right? And very late when they have actually come up with maybe sometimes even a brilliant idea, but an idea which is not going to be practical or implementable or feasible in our settings, right? And so that's one of the causes of failure that you talked about earlier, that why is it that we're not able to move beyond a certain stage of development. Now, parallelly, clinicians sometimes have interesting ideas, but they don't just have mechanisms to take it forward because you don't have that kind of infrastructure, resources, or even the mentorship and support which is required. Very few institutions, some of which are represented on this call, some of the newer INIs are also talking about departments of translational medicine. There's one at AIIMS Bhopal, I live in Bhopal, for example, but these are relatively new, right? And maybe there is a requirement for these kinds of transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary departments which can help pull together the clinicians, the technologists, the statisticians, right? And of course, then try to figure out what is it that we can work on, which is of public health relevance. If we don't do it, then we will not really have the kind of quicker turnaround and more focused research that we need, which is in line with our public health needs and is in line with also something which is potentially a device or a product which can be taken forward to the market. The market could be a public health market, doesn't need to be necessarily only a very commercial market. But unless we have those mechanisms, it's likely not going to happen. And that's where I think the role of catalytic funding becomes important. And SAMARTH is one attempt at that. But also, I think the role of institutional cultural change and also in our own, various specialities, opening up these conversations around why research and how research becomes important. And when Ritika, you speak, I'd like to maybe have you also speak to the importance of public understanding of the importance of research and how we can get more of that happening. I know you led a grant recently, which was about speaking about mental health and taking it out into the community, including speaking about the kind of research which is happening and how that is also important because we need public support for research as well, which will hopefully also push some policy action in this. But I'll call upon you, Ritika, for your thoughts.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. So in terms of your question, Satya, about my journey, so my training, I came up entirely in basic science of departments, but my interest always was in translational, how to take the outputs of basic research and towards a larger good. And so fortunately, I was able to find that at NIMHANS, but it is not lost on me how rare an opportunity that is in the Indian ecosystem to be in a setting where I have access to not only other basic scientists in the institute, but also across institute, because the Center for Brain and Mind is currently from two institutes. So the collaborative opportunities as well as funding is critical, and that is not in the process of getting to here. I that was sort of not, if not quite rubbed in your face, but something close to that of, what you need to do research we don't have or we can provide. The very being very set in their way. So the institutes, the flexibility is kind of wanting on a larger scale. When the institutes advertise for a position, they're kind of like, we need this. You have to be this age, this expertise, this, and if you don't fit that, that's it. The conversation doesn't go any further. It's not about your research output and what you can bring, but in being in that framework. So that makes things very difficult. But considering that, I was fortunate to be in this position, and the grant that Anand mentioned about bringing research into the public forum. So yeah, we had a grant recently where Anand was a collaborator of mine, and we talked about mental illness, its perception, the research that's ongoing, and that gave us the opportunity to talk, conduct events in various parts of the country and speak to people about research. And so while people are excited when they hear about the kind of research happening, but it is also stark that the point at which, like, what research is and what it can do, on a larger scale, there needs to be a lot more conversations. And this has been a question of debate of, should researchers be pushed into it, and should it be mandatory outreach, and so on. And there are points on both sides, but wherever possible, so again, it was good that this grant provided us an opportunity to bring that out into the forums. And so obviously it would be great if there were more opportunities available to whoever is interested to take their research out into the public forum. Like Point of Science is such a forum where scientists who want to can talk to a larger public and get feedback. So it works both ways. Not only they hear about research, but we can also hear about what do public want in terms of research.
Okay, brilliantly put, Ritika. Thank you. Dr. Tony, you want to comment briefly before I ask Gaurav and Pooja? Pooja has been the most patient amongst all of us here.
Yeah. So I'll talk about, you mentioned about in our journey working with industry. Over the 20 years, yes, St. John's has worked with various industry, yes, starting with the pharmaceutical industry, and we've managed to translate some of that work into actual practice or policy. For example, the whole evidence of the poly pill or polycap study that we did for 15 years ago or 18 years ago. It took about 18 years finally for the WHO to list it as an essential drug. Of course, it still has to percolate down, but we had to work with pharma industry to develop the polypill. So that was one concept. But we've now moved on. We've worked with the food industry. We've worked with IT industry. A lot of it has been co-design, and more lately, we work with plenty of startups, and we typically prefer to work from the early stages while they're in their conception. They're thinking of the idea, but that really works to develop a much better product with a certain rigor. And more recently with the biomedical engineering, groups, and there as well, either co-designing or working with validating the technologies that already exist. And I think it's been a very fruitful journey where translation into finally taking it to the the public or into the market has been an excellent journey. And I think we're still scratching the surface. There's so much more that can happen. And I'm sure opportunities like what BFI is bringing out with the SAMARTH project is going to be beneficial.
Thank you for mentioning that. And, exactly, SAMARTH hopefully will bridge some of those gaps. We'll talk about it. Pooja will mention the nuances of the program itself. And I just wanted to, so if a pharma company, the mindset has shifted, you were saying. So 30 years back, if a pharma company walked into a research institute or a hospital, not their MRs, but to do a co-development project, that has changed in the last 20, 30 years. That's what you are saying, and this is something that we want to encourage in the future. I'll bring in. Thank you, Dr. Tony, for that. I'll bring in Pooja here. I think, as I said, she's one of the most patient persons I know personally, and she has again proven it today. is 7-8 years in Strand. I'm naming Strand because your LinkedIn profile says Strand. I know you since those days. So you work with clinicians. What was that interaction like?
Thank you, Stan. It's really been, I've been patient, but I've also been learning a lot, I think. So that was a discussion. So I have had both. It's been actually, again, a lot of very patient working with physicians. So when Strand started working on next-gen sequencing more than 12 years back, it was still new system. So discussing, and just like we had the discussion, there are clinicians who are interested in research, but there are clinicians who are interested in taking care of their patients. And when we went and interacted as an organization, as a company that is building this new technology as a diagnostic tool, that we had to communicate with the physician. There were physicians who were really interested, who were interested in the science behind it, and the uptake was very early. But that was very handful of them. In majority of the cases, we had to, it was an uphill learning curve for us, how to educate, work together with them to help them integrate this technology into their practices. And also to educate the patient, help them educate their patient. So we had to have genetic counselors also working with the patient so that patients can understand importance of this research or this technology. So I think whenever we are doing building new technology, building really, diagnostics, it is important to bring in physicians early on. And that really helps, not just in how you can spread the word and integrate it into the common practice, but also for people who are building those technologies so that they can make it into something that is more accessible and usable. So it has been very interesting.
Absolutely. And I think in India, we lack platforms, and hopefully, through BFI here, not just SAMARTH, we'll bring in clinicians and researchers onto one platform, more so, right? So, of course, Dr. Tony is known all across the world, but maybe there's somebody in tiny corner somewhere in India who needs to meet him, right?
Absolutely.
And I think those kind of platforms, and same with Ritika and others who were here. I think this is important, and we have taken note of that. We'll do that. With my CEO here, I don't know how he does what he does. As I said, you are now in the spot in a sense. I'm not going to put you on the spot from the SAMARTH side, but I've been to KD Medical College, thanks to you. It's humongous in terms of infrastructure. What are the steps you think we could do with similar kind of colleges that have humongous infrastructure, absolute lot of patient footfalls, great minds as doctors who choose to be there? How do we encourage, research culture in a place like KD Medical College?
Yes, sir. So, like in the panel discussion, it came up very frequently. We definitely need more role models. Entering MBBS, his major goal is to get a clinical branch and either go into a corporate or open his own nursing home or hospital. Once you open one nursing home, then the next goal is to open one more, and so on. And you'll be surprised to know that the branches that are not clinical are not taken up as a primary choice by most people. This is I think is the biggest problem. But people who are taking these basic sciences branches by choice need to be more aware about these type of opportunities. I can bet you that an MBBS student in my college does not know about institute like THSTI that is just 1.5 hours away. So the awareness plus the role modeling is what we need. We have to come out with doctors like we already met Dr. Karthikeyan, we met other people who are very much active in clinical field plus research field, and they are acting as also role model for the whole community of MBBS doctors.
You've thrown a challenge to molecular biologists. What you are saying is to clone Dr. Tony's and Dr. Ritikas and Dr. Karthik's of the world. So that the challenge is taken. But no, the jokes apart, I think that's a very valid point. Role models in smaller colleges, they may not be smaller colleges, and colleges are big, but in smaller towns, right? That's what you mentioned.
And there's one more thing, sir. Research is considered to be a poor man's choice in most places. So if you are a researcher, you are not earning much. This is the basic concept that has been percolating in our medical education most of the time. We need to show them, like Pramesh sir said, that we need to make research sexy. We need to show those BMWs and the Lamborghinis with the researchers. Then only we can actually push medical community to take that.
Interestingly, Dr. Bhanu also mentioned that about compensations, and it's a very interesting conversation when you reflect on it. No, very well pointed. I just see that Dr. Santa Kumari has been so fabulously active and engaging with us. I think I can't see her, but thank you for writing your notes on the side. And I completely agree. Public health oriented research projects with high degree of honesty. And I say this because every other day I get a retraction watch. India Retraction Watch sends me, unfortunately, papers that have been retracted. And how do you deal with that? In the name of research, we shouldn't be doing fraud, right? And how do we do that? We don't have the time for this today. I'll leave it to Gaurav here, and Faraj and Priyal and Sonalika and Sana and Annapurna. I think they're the ones, and Kashish. I can't see them, but they're the ones who've been in the background pushing us to do. I don't know whether time is there, or I think we should talk about the nuances of the SAMARTH program itself. Unless one quick round robin, round table, 1 minute pitch by each of you. What is it exactly, if you had the power, what would you change in the immediate, in the midterm, and in the future of changing medical research? Or, another Satya in 100 years' time will pick out another science article and will quote from there. I'll start with Anand and Dr. Tony, and then who else is there? Dr. Gaurav and Pooja. 1 minute each. Time starts now.
So I think we need funding, Satya, which is why I think Samarth is an example. We need mentors. So we hope Samarth will help build those mentors and those champions of good quality research in the country. We need governance and infrastructure, and we need institutional support. And that's where I think some of the institutions highlighted today can also be, initial champions to show the way as to how this is already possible, and with more support through initiatives like BFI-BIOME, SAMARTH, and other funders hopefully will join in, we will be able to change the ecosystem for the better. Thank you.
Okay, great. Changing the ecosystem, boiling the sea. I mean, that's the cliche term, but yes, thank you, Dr. Tony. Before I jump in, Dr. Tony, I forgot to take two names, Priyal and Faraj, who've been up there with their guns raised, telling us what to do for the last 15 days. And we're following their orders until now. I can see my WhatsApp, and Faraj is texting. So just to let people know that a lot of people have gone behind this to be what we are doing now. Okay, thank you, Anand, for saying that. Changing the ecosystem, hopefully, in the near to medium term. Dr. Ritika?
Yeah, in the near future, I think that if there are more forums, the system doesn't now allow for interactions, but if there could be forums where clinicians, basic scientists can interact and allow for opportunities to brainstorm and come up with ideas, and of course, funding to then bring it to fruition, that can definitely make a big difference in terms of out of that will automatically come role models and taking that out into a bigger sphere and making it accessible to more people. Perfect.
Thank you. And Dr. Tony?
Yeah, I would highlight and echo the role model and champions, but equally training. I believe if someone is in a tier 2 city or in a small town, they should be able to be trained by larger, entities who are already well soaked into research. And that cultural shift is so important to make a change. money, I believe, will come. There are government systems like the Section 35 for IT exemption in the IT Act, which provides for companies to donate at 100% exemption. So I think we just need to change, make that cultural change, and have role models and people who can inspire, light a flame, and share that.
Thank you. And when you say training, you mean pedagogy of research methods, methodology?
More experiential. I think one is pedagogy, but also, there's nothing like participating in a research grant writing workshop and then taking that grant to fruition, taking it to submitting it. I think that's experiential, and I think that was discussed earlier as well. But that or participating in a research project itself is all learning, and I think that cross-pollination between institutes that can do it with small town or small tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities could be one way forward.
One last quick question. Do you interact with IIM Bangalore?
Yes, I do interact, and I do teach a small course there as well. But
fabulous. I think that management thing is so important. Yes. Thank you. Thanks. Pooja?
Yeah, so some of the points are already covered, but what I hope to do at least, or wish to have more forums like Dr. Sood said, where collaborations can be encouraged as a catalytic funder. The other thing that I hope that can change is just the whole process through which even funding is used by patients, even if the funding is readily available. And then in the long term, I hope that through these steps, we can create a mindset for translation. And of course, like funding, having mentors, having role models, but change the mindset so that more physicians can actually do translational research for the benefit.
Wonderful. Thank you. Before Gaurav comes in, I think I would like to say that we need more Sandeep Nailwal and more Gaurav Singh. Philanthropy in India for biomedical research and innovation, right? I mean, every kind of philanthropy is needed, but this is a unique philanthropy that, of course, global philanthropies are there in biomedical research and innovation. I don't deny that fact. But in India, to do this and to have the generosity and the benefaction of leaders, young leaders, to come and give it back to India at this age is something that I think at my age I'm learning here in BFI. And I think we should encourage that. How do you do that in a policy level in terms of income tax? All those matters is something for the government to start thinking about it. But we definitely need to look that we have more Sandeep Nailwals and more Gaurav Singh. Now that I've taken Gaurav Singh's name, so what's your future thoughts about what we should be doing in terms of not just SAMARTH, but what is it that you would like to see in the near and the middle and the future state of India?
First of all, I'd express my gratitude to all the panelists because the points that were brought up, and I'm glad that most of the points are already covered in SAMARTH program, like the upfront funding, the flexibility of the funding, and the Indian context. You can all find this in SAMARTH. So thank you, Dr. Satya and Dr. Pooja, for designing such a wonderful program to begin with. Now, the major theme of today's discussion was the cultural change, the role models, the time for research. I have one suggestion that every month we have to submit what you can say the monthly schedule for doctors, which have IPD days, OPD days, emergency days. We can also include a research day in that if that is promoted by the agencies that are governing the medical colleges now. So a research day will be a very helpful phenomena. At least people will be sitting down in the chambers and reading papers and deciding on what to do next. Like rightly said, the culture has to change. Culture will only change with the change in funding. So if you don't find a lot of money in a particular thing, you are not likely to take that up. So yes, funding is a very important factor, and we do think that with the help of Sandeep in future also we'll be able to raise more money and fund the projects like SAMARTH. We are already looking for an investment of I must say funding of 1,500 crores in next 5 years, and we need to bring more of it through other agencies also. That's all from my side.
Thank you. I think thanks to all panelists. I know we can continue, and Pooja has to also come in now with the SAMARTH. CMEs, do you think basic scientists and biologists go to CMEs? Or CMEs is just for doctors? This is a question to Anant, Ritika, and Dr. Tony. Or you have, Monday mornings, the neurosurgeons meet, and Tuesday mornings, the pathologists meet, the oncologists meet, or whatever the day in the morning they meet. And sometimes I used to go. Do you go to the such meetings, Ritika?
No, not really.
Okay. That's the gap, which I think we need to open up, right? And so,
if they would cater to a broader audience, if there was...
no, if they're talking about a case study, which is fine. If there is a patient, they're talking about that patient on a Monday morning. There's a live patient right now in the ward. They're taking care of her or him. I wonder, of course, it won't be molecular level talks, but if you integrate
I get that, but then
all that,
you know how people talk in different vocabulary, even though they may be saying the same thing, but you say it very differently depending on who you're saying it to. So within them, there's a whole lot of acronyms and things, and I went to a few actually, but I found I was just making a list of stuff that I needed to know to even understand the basics of who would say what. So that was what I meant by broadening the scope of, expect people who are not clinicians to be there, then you would say them maybe the same thing differently.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think
I would love to go, but I just, it's just, I got too lost in the thing.
Okay, understood. Anant and Dr. Tony and Gaurav has raised his hand. So we'll finish after this. So who wants to go first? Anant?
Satya, so there are CMEs and there are CMEs, right?
Good that you said that. I was hoping somebody says that.
Yeah, some of those are more about the meals and entertainment. So that's the M&E part of it. And some of those are about the continuing education.
I'm happy that Anand is saying this despite it is being recorded. It's well on, more power.
I think all of us know this happens, right? But there are also good examples. I've been to a few at SJRI, I've been to a few at Tata Memorial and some other institutions where it's not about the sponsorship, it's about getting people in and focusing on the content, and people turn up. I think if you have good content and you focus down and keep it very clear that this is about learning and this is about focusing down on that, then people will turn up. So I think that culture is very important in the institution, and as much as possible we should do it within institutions, not in hotels or fancy venues. Let's do it in our institutions and encourage faculty, students to come in and learn. There are lots of opportunities there.
Thank you. Dr. Tony, and then
so we do it at a much smaller level, although CMEs do happen at sometimes a larger level, but interdepartmental, divisions, we do have at least about 8 to 9 faculty who are basic scientists embedded across the institute. And more recently, we've onboarded a very senior faculty from another institute. And so we have clinicians who are trained in basic science who can crosstalk, who understand both sides. Plus, we have basic scientists. And some of the ideas, right, from identifying biomarkers to, newer ideas. Can you imagine a neurologist walks in and says, I've set up a zebrafish lab in my neurology office. So I said, okay, why don't you start shifting it to the animal house or, a more secure area? And he brings videos. And this is the kind of ideas that come up, and he's got an idea and he's chasing that. So this is the kind of stuff happening here. It's exciting to see a clinician trying to go into basic science. So then we connect them with a basic scientist and say, can we, look at this problem and help them?
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. One of the earliest ones I met while I was undergrad is Dr. Raghu Padnijat at NCPS. He has transitioned from MBBS to a PhD.
Yes.
And then worked on Drosophila and that. So I haven't been in touch with him, but yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Gaurav, we'll close with you.
And I think just to add to Dr. Anand Bans, and I will end it with a trivia that Gujarat Psychiatric Association never has their annual meeting in Gujarat. So you can understand why it is not so. And just to add to one more thing on the discussion, currently the medical society, the medical fraternity is very much I can say going towards super specialization, that we are creating more and more silos in coming times, that there is one super specialization, then the conferences are also based on such super specializations. We hardly have a conference in which you invite all branches together. I think the biggest of this amalgamation happens at Pulse in AIMS. Otherwise, I don't recall a single conference that has invited all the faculties from all branches together. So this also needs to be pondered upon, that how can we interact more, how can we discuss things more, how can we bring everyone on a common platform. So we are currently struggling to bring doctors together, and then the next step is to bring the academia like IIT, ISCs along with doctors, and then like the BIOME's vision, that we have academia, industry, medical colleges all on a single platform doing research that is helpful for the country.
Perfect. Thank you. So big round of applause to our panelists who have continued to stay with us, and those who had to rush because of other engagement. We are really indebted to them. I think no amount of words can really save the kind of time you have given to us, the full 2 hours. And for me, there's been a lot of learning as well, and meeting new people. I think I never met before, so great. I look forward to staying in touch.